My glasses.
Oh, hello again, guys. Welcome to our broadcast. Today we got many questions about character designs and how to make character designs for comics and what's the difference between character designs of comics and animations, how to translate those lines, and how do you break into the industry. With our guests here, we are truly honored to have him to answer our questions. Let's welcome our guest, Jonboy Meyers. Hello there, Jonboy.
Hey, what's up, Andrew? How you guys doing?
Everything is fine here. What about you?
Doing good, doing good. Just it's the holidays here, so things are kind of gearing down for most people. But for me, I work from home all the time, so I'm always busy doing stuff. But how's things on your end? How are you guys doing?
Well, things are fine here. So I'm having the same life as you say because I'm an artist too. So
Mhm.
staying at home and working from home, it seems strange to others, but it's nothing new to our industry that we
No,
freelancers and
yeah,
artists do this all the time.
yeah. I like working from home. Like when this whole COVID thing happened, like my wife's like, "Oh, I got to work from home now." I was like, "Oh, well, at least we can have lunch together now," because I've been doing this now for 24 years now, like working
Mm.
freelance comics and stuff like that. So I've almost always worked from home, just about. I've done studio stuff too, which I like. I kind of miss, but yeah, it's just it's kind of nice having the wife around. So it's nice. So
Hmm. So, first, we're going to ask you a couple unscripted questions before we head to the scripted
yeah,
ones.
yeah, let's do it. Yeah, what's up?
What's your secret origins?
My secret origins is it's pretty much like everyone else's. Like I was introduced to comics by my dad, who was in the military, and he would bring comics home for us to read, and there were mostly war comics like Sergeant Rock and World War Tales and Enemy Ace, stuff like that. And I would love those. I would read them up, because I mean, it was comics. It was something new for me, like the idea, because I was always into art as a kid. But then when you see comics, then you kind of want to draw what you see. And then one day, my dad brought home some superhero comics, which was a Captain America Bicentennial album drawn by Jack Kirby, where he fights Magneto and the mutates. And I just kind of went crazy. I was like, what is this? I didn't know what superheroes really were. I mean, I was aware of Batman and stuff like that from cartoons, but the whole idea of a comic book with superheroes was kind of new to me, and immediately fell in love and just ate them up. And pretty soon, me and some of my friends in the neighborhood were making our own comic books and sell them for 25 cents, which was completely stupid because we were stupid kids back then. We would work all week or a couple of weeks and with copy paper and staple it and then sell it for like a quarter, and then we'd go buy a comic book.
I think we
Yeah,
all did the same thing as
yeah,
kids.
yeah. Because you thought, well, oh yeah, well they sell them for like 40 cents or 25 cents, so we would do the same thing. But we worked so hard on these comics, it was just these stupid kids. We didn't know, but that's pretty much how I got into doing comics, and I'd always do my own mini comics and always kept drawing and wanted to do stuff. And then pretty soon I started going to comic shows like San Diego Comic Con. And this is back in the day when we'd stand in these huge queues for like hours and hours and hours, just the opportunity to have our like 2 to 5 minute time frame where we just show work, hopefully trying to break in. So consistency is a big deal. You know what I mean? It is definitely a measure of how bad you want it. But breaking in is different from everybody. I've met people who never drew comics before and just did it for the first time and broke right in and had instant fame and success. Whereas others like myself, I was grinding it out for a long time. So everyone's journey is different. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's so cool and so adventurous at the same time.
Yeah, it is. So it is a testament to sticking to it. There is such a thing as never giving up, because to everyone who does get disgruntled and kind of, which I'm a word, just upset, like things aren't happening for them right away. You got to remember, like, you got to run your own race, and everyone's journey is different, and how you get there is differently. Usually I found that people who get there really fast, it really goes to their head and they become this huge monster. So, so you don't want that. You want to be somebody who actually took time and have an appreciation for when you finally do arrive. It's like, okay, this is kind of a culmination of X amount of years of work. So just stick to it.
Just stick to it. Your future is what you do every day.
Yeah, I think that's the thing about it is like you always get these questions from people about like, well, how do I break in and what do I need to do? And my first question is for me is like, well, how often do you draw? Well, do you want to work in comics? Or like, well, yeah, let's say, all right. How often do you put together your own comic samples? They're like, well, once a year. And I'm like, well, that's like me wanting to be a professional soccer player and I only practice once a year. And I expect like, oh, well, now where's my millions of dollars in contracts? Because I'm just this amazing guy. And I'm like, if you gotta, the only parallel that people understand is with sports. So if you really want to become a working artist or a comic book artist or animator, I would say is, how many hours a day do you practice your craft? You have to treat it like a second job. If you want to get good, much like sports, basketball or soccer, you got to practice every day, repetition. And it could be anywhere from creative writing to sketching to drawing. Like if you want to work in comics or you want to do character design, start practicing character designs all the time. So it's kind of putting yourself in that mind frame, because a lot of people kind of expect like, well, I spent 2 hours on this, now I should instantly have a job. And it's just like, that's like the equivalent of winning the lottery. It just doesn't happen that way. So it's not realistic. Yeah.
That's so right.
Yeah.
Well, Jonboy Meyers does have weapons of choice that he uses to make art. So what's your weapons of choice?
I used to be very traditional, where I'd work at, I had I still have a setup here where I work traditionally. A lot of my layouts I would do on copy paper, and then either I would just transfer that from Lightbox on top of regular paper to clean it up, or I would blow them up and do the same thing. But now comics now has kind of evolved now. Like deadlines are a lot shorter and they're more iterative. When I mean iterative, it means that you get a lot more feedback now. So they expect you to make more changes and patches to the fly. So when you got a traditionalist like myself who likes to work with traditional tools, when they look at you and say, well, we don't really like this face, or can we swap this panel out? I'm just like, okay, well, that means I have to redraw it. So I made more moves to digital now a little bit, where it's easier to patch stuff, tweak stuff around, because the level of changes you get sometimes are so arbitrary now that it's just like, they're like, well, I don't really care for her hair. And I'm just like, for me, that's kind of a low value change. Like, okay, well, I'll get it right on the next panel. It's no big deal. But, like it's like, okay, whatever, do it digitally. Just.
So you still have some passion for pencils?
Oh, I love pencils. I love working traditionally. That's my preferred method of choice. I like having an original that I can keep or sell. For me, traditional is more of a true measure of the type of artist you are, just for some fact that there's no undo button, and you can't build a brush that instantly gives you that perfect line or perfect crosshatch or whatever you want. To learn traditional tools traditionally, it takes many years of practice, many nights of pulling your hair out and self-doubt and thinking you suck and, oh, I can't do this and it's so hard. It's a whole different mindset, because that's where you learn things traditionally to do it by hand. Whereas digital, you have all these cheats that are made to be time savers, but also that read high value, but are anybody can reproduce that to a certain extent, where when you're a traditional artist, it's like, I've noticed a lot of my friends who are traditional can take really quickly to the digital format, because like whether painters or stuff like that, because it speeds them up. They can do faster things with it. They have more control versus, if you're doing watercolors and things like that, sometimes it's those happy little accidents that happen too, but it's a much longer process working traditional. It's just the nature of it. It's a different skill set. You don't have that undo button. How many people, Had that undo button for that, like, oh, it's not the line I want, doom, doom, doom. Oh, okay, here it is. This is the line I want. And you don't get that when you're working tradition. It's like one shot, one kill. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially with the anchored.
Well, yeah, with inkers, it's especially true because they're held to a much higher line quality standard than a penciler because that's final product. And we as pencilers give the inkers an idea of what we want. I'm usually a lot more tighter because I'm like, hey, look, I really want it like this. But you really have to be pretty precise because great pencils and bad inking equals bad art. So yeah, but inking because of digital is kind of going the way of the dodo a little bit because now there's only a few ink masters left really who are actually really doing it well. Whereas a lot of that's kind of being phased out now because of digital. More pencilers like myself now, because we're being forced to work digitally, are just saying, well, like if I've got these great digital ink brushes now that make me look awesome, I'll just use those. So and get an inking rate on top of that. I mean, it's I hate doing it like that, but it's just kind of the nature of our business is changing. Comics aren't making as much money like it used to in the US. And, so we have to, like rates have gone down. So if we need to make more money, then it's like, well, I'm going to absorb this inking rate, and I hate taking food off other people's plate, but it's kind of the nature of business. You got to survive. So, but it's turning out, I think, much different types of creators now, because now we have creators now that also pencil, ink, and write now, which honestly kind of puts us in a much better pole position for being our own cottage industries unto ourselves. Because then at that point, we can choose to whether or not we want to work with publishers or not, because we can self-publish at that point, or we can work with a publisher, or we can do a Kickstarter. So good and bad, like things are evolving. It's neither good or bad. I think we're going to see a swing back probably the next couple of years where it'll go back to traditional teams again. I think, but you have to rebuild that market. So we'll see what happens.
So if I wasn't an artist, I would be.
What's that? Oh, really? Yeah. I think the thing about it is I think anybody can be an artist because art is so subjective these days. As far as the thing is, the art has to match your narrative. You know what I mean? If you create a narrative, you can build art around it.
The question is about you. If you wasn't an artist, you would be.
Oh, what would I be? I would probably be either a forensic scientist, or I would be some sort of medical doctor, probably working in a lab, like microbiology, virology, things like that, are things that interest me. Prior to that, actually,
I love science.
Oh, I love, yeah. I mean, I have my 4-year degree. I have my 4-year science degree. I was supposed to go to get my master's in blood work and microbiology, but I decided not to because I wanted to go into art. So that's what I did. Like an idiot. So, because I mean, but I think the thing about it is like, as much as I love science, I mean, I really have a passion for art. And I think, honestly, if I would have just pursued and stuck true to my passions in art, I think I'd probably be in film now. But I mean, the thing about it is it is what it is. We are the sum of our choices. I think, though, if you have a real talent and passion for art, that you should definitely try to pursue it as much as you can. But if you don't, like, having it as just a hobby or something side too is always fine too. There's nothing wrong with that. So, yeah.
Are you a villain or a superhero?
Me in real life? I think I'm a superhero. I've always tried to do the right thing and always try to help people out, even to my detriment, But I don't know. I think like I learned values by reading comic books. So not comic books of today, but comic books growing up. So like Captain America, Batman, these guys were always like, strong moral code, and that really imprinted upon me as a young kid. So comics helped shape who I am now. So, which is not a bad thing, I guess. So, yeah.
What games do you play?
I used to play a lot of Street Fighter, mostly fight games, but being a freelance artist, I'm not really big in the big MMO type games where you have to go on these long journeys and spend hours and hours and hours, because I'm a working artist, so 4 hours at the TV playing a video game is less production time. And most of my production days are like anywhere from like 8 to 14-hour days to 16-hour days, sometimes if I'm on deadline. So, that doesn't leave a lot of time to play a lot of games. So usually I would just stick with like fight games, play for like 20 minutes or 30 minutes, and that's it. And I'm done. Or I play League of Legends or something like that. Just kind of blow off some steam. But I haven't played anything for a couple of months now, just because I've been so busy with work. And as much as I love games, it's just like, being a working artist, you have to learn how to prioritize work in your workflow. And, the deadlines don't go away. The thing about it is especially if you're having a tough day, try to push through it and work through it. Because, some days as an artist, you feel unstoppable and you can draw anything. And then the next day you're like, you can't draw an eyeball to save your life. You just have to do the work that you have within your capacity on that time. So,
yeah, that's so right.
Yeah.
Well, how did you start your career?
How did I start my career? Well, it was mostly just submitting, and doing it. Like I used to mail in samples. Kind of like with Todd McFarlane, they have all these letters that they show, like, hey, I did this. I have a bunch of those somewhere, but it's just like, there's no ego to show those. It's like, what's the point? Like, I'm working now. That's all that matters. But, yeah, I would say in the long lines and work. And I did a lot of indie stuff, like prior to like officially breaking into comics. I did a lot of indie work, I do free work for anybody who would like have me do a pinup or do a cover or do interiors. I just do it for free. I'm like, hey, whatever. I just want to get my work out, because you want to show publishers that, hey, you are reliable. You have published work out there. Like, okay, we can trust this guy. Give him a job. He's going to get the job done. And this is kind of what it's going to look like. So whether that's good or bad, because starting out, everyone's work is like horrible. But my first professional job in comics was actually as a marketing director. I worked at a place called MV Creations. We did all the He-Man comics, and we published all the Rob Zombie comics and Dragon's Lair comics and stuff like that back in the, I guess, late or early 2000. All the Image He-Man stuff that we did. So I worked on that. I did that for about 2 years and decided to leave. And wanted to say, okay, you know what, I really want to get serious about comics. So I gave myself 6 months to say, I'm going to do nothing but comic books. That's it. I'm not going to get a regular job. I'm just going to throw my money into, like all my time into this and try to get it. And I put together some samples and sent them off, to Joe Quesada, who liked them, and sent them off to CB Cebulski over at Marvel. And it was kind of weird. Like after I'd sent some samples off, I think like 2 weeks later, I got a phone call from Marvel saying, hey, we want to hire you to work on the kids line for Spider-Man. So that was actually pretty cool. I was just like, what? That's it? I'm like, oh, great. Okay, cool. So the work, the thing about it was like I was on the same book as Mark Brooks, and Mark is even at that time, Mark was just like he had a rocket ship strapped to his back. He was an amazing artist, and my work wasn't quite there, but I was really thankful to get the work that I did. So I think you just try to make the most of what you can out of every job and try to get better and better and better. And it's hard to try not to compare yourself to other artists. You know what I mean? Because comparison is the thief of joy kind of deal. Because you feel like you're not there work-wise as your favorite artist just means you just need to practice more and try to figure out your own art. Because over time, your work will evolve into its own thing. You will move past the people who inspired you. Your work may feel familiar, like your influences may be familiar with you.
But doesn't comparison makes you lower your intentions, lower yourself, something like this?
I think it makes you feel like crap. that's like the equivalent is, you always got to remember, is like your framing. You're like, okay, when I'm comparing my work, like breaking in, especially to like, it's like comparing your level as a soccer player starting out to your level of a soccer player to like Pele or somebody like that. You know what I mean? You're just like, dude, of course, compared to Pele, you're going to suck. like, dude, like, you know, so your framing is like, look, like, I have to make small victories for myself and saying, look, you know what? The thing about growth is you want to look at your growth over like set realistic goals, like 3 months, 6 months, 1 year. And after that time, after 3 months, evaluate what's working in your work, what's not. 6 months, evaluate what's working in your work and what's not. And then when you compare that from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, you're going to see a big difference. And if you don't, then you say, okay, well, what am I doing wrong here? Do I need to simplify my work? What's not working for me? What am I spending too long on? You know what I mean? These are these micro decisions that you're kind of learning. This is what kind of goes into making your own style. You know what I mean? You're going to figure out like, well, you know, I don't really draw like that anymore. Like, I don't want to draw super realistic. I like Bruce Timm style. That's easier for me. That's something I like to do. So I'm going to do that. I'm like, okay, cool. Take the Bruce Timm style and evolve from that. And, you know, it's a process. And if anybody says, well, you're too much like this guy or that guy, like, most people I tell them they can just, who cares? Like, every artist who started out has had some base of where they started, you know, where, I mean, we stand on each other's shoulders, you know what I mean? That's how we get better. Like, this is from caveman art until the time we're at. Everyone looks at everybody, even the old masters looked at their, you know, the students copied the master. That's how they learned their basics. And then they went off and either did the same thing or did their own thing, you know. It's all part of that process. I think people think that when you're starting out, you have to be this fully formed, your own unique thing. It just is not realistic. I mean, come on, you're still learning the ropes. You're trying to figure out who you are as an artist and what works for you and what doesn't. And as an artist, you can pick and choose from many different artists and make your own style out of it. You know, there's nothing wrong with that. And people have it, hang up with it. Who cares? Like, opinions are like Doritos. Like, who cares? Like, everyone's going to have their own favorite flavor. They're going to say their own thing about it. It's like, well, it's a free country. Say what you want. I don't care. Like,
you already told us you work for about 14 hours a day.
Yes.
So what's your workflow?
Usually, like, I will get up about 5 o'clock in the morning, work out, shower, have breakfast, kind of center myself for the day, go to my desk, answer emails for the first hour. So by the time I get moving, it's about 9 o'clock in the morning, and I work from 9 to about 12. Break for lunch for about 30 minutes. I'll answer more emails if I need to. If I have anything to send out for my web store, I'll take an hour to package that up and get that ready to go. Then I'm back at it from around anywhere from like 12:30 to about 3:30. Go for a walk, get out of the house for about 30 minutes, 45 minutes, come back, work a little bit for another hour, and then cook dinner, and then hang out with my wife. And then from like usually 7 o'clock all the way from like anywhere from 9 to maybe 10 o'clock, 10:30, work, and then go to bed. I try not to do all-nighters, and I try not to work past 10 to 10:30 because I get up at 5 in the morning. So try to keep normal hours like that as much as I can. So some days certain things eat up a little bit more time, but I found that if you try to time box stuff, like, hey, look, I'm only giving, I'm going to answer as many emails as I can in like 20 minutes, and that's it. And if I don't get to these, I don't get to them later on during the day or things like that, because you have a lot of distractions that can pull you away, especially when you're having a hard day at art and you have this panel that you really don't want to do, or this cover layout you really don't want to do, but it's like, well, you just got to get to it. It's like, dude, stop putting it off, stop procrastinating, just get to it, finish your stuff that you need to do, your pre-game stuff, and get your head right and just go right into it. So, yeah.
Well, I do remember back in the day
Sorry, I got a phone call. Let me decline that.
Okay. Well, I do remember back in the day when I watched your DeviantArt, you had a couple of character designs back then. That way it was way so cool, actually. But it wasn't the actual character designs we see at Marvel. You kind of like added the Jonboyish touch to those characters. So how do you remake those character designs, or create character designs from scratch while keeping the main features of those characters with your own style?
Okay, so I think it's kind of a two-part question. So the first part is when I'm designing characters for a company, what's really important to me is I try to get to the core of who the character is as far as what the fan base is. So I'll do a little research and find out, like, well, what was people's favorite take on this character? Like, oh, you know, what costume? Like, well, a lot of people liked, like, we'll take Beast Boy, for example. Like, a lot of people were like, you know, everyone loved the George Perez Beast Boy design. You know, that was just beloved. Like, okay, we love this. So it's like, okay, you know what? So when I'm redesigning this character, the thing I have to do is I need to stick to something that feels familiar. Like, okay, so Beast Boy wore a jumper back then, so I'm going to put him in a jumper now. I want to stick with the main colors, which is white and red. I want to incorporate that into the costume. Because the thing is, you have to respect fandom, because fandom is what keeps these characters going. It's the fans that keep these characters going when these characters lose favor. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. These are the people who stick by. It's like sticking by your man or woman regardless, right? You know, through thick and thin, you know, this character's highs and lows, but these are the fans who've been here since day one, and they're always going to be fans no matter what. Mm-hmm. So those are the people I'm doing the design for, because those are the people who stuck with that character the longest, and I want to do something that's going to honor those folks. So that's what I try to do my designs around. I try to boil down what I thought the fans like the most, what colors, what elements. And then when I'm doing the redesign, I'm like, okay, so when I'm thinking Beast Boy, I want to kind of play up that he's a little bit more wild. So I gave him, like, you know, I gave him sideburns. They're kind of bushy. I gave him wilder hair. I gave him bigger forearms. I made him look like there's kind of a fun, wild element to the character, because that's what, when we think about, when we boil down Beast Boy, he's a fun, wild kind of guy. So it's like, okay, you want to incorporate personality traits into the design, because when people look at that character, people want to say, oh yeah, that's Beast Boy. You captured his emotion, like his personality, his costume, everything. You got it right. You know what I mean? Because all these little things, when people look at design, we have these little mental check boxes, like check. Oh, he did this, he did that. That fits in line with who we think that character is. So you're not designing because, like, I'm this great designer. You're designing based off of, like, you're taking in the information and filtering that down. You know what I mean? That's what makes for good design, because then who people think that character is, when they see that design, oh, that's who that character is. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of fails. Like, I think when they redesigned Lobo in the New 52, I don't know if you remember this, but instead of making him a big biker, kind of crazy, they made him a young kid, and which is the exact opposite of it. And it really upset the fan base. And people were like, well, this is not who Lobo is. And people rallied against it. They're like, no, this is dumb. You guys are idiots. You didn't get it right. You know, and then pretty soon they switched back, because, like, okay, well, we went too far. Sorry, we went too far. But that's the thing, is, like, you need to understand who your audience is. And when you're creating content, especially content that's been around for a while, you have to honor the fan base. Now, and incorporate, you know, like for me, and then I want to incorporate my own elements into it to kind of like add my flair to it. When I'm creating for myself, I build it around narratives. So I'll write up what I think who this character is first. So when you're doing a design, like, let's say you're doing a wizard, you know, I write down, or I put together a mood board and an image board of what I think a wizard is. So I'll put all these images down. I'll, like, okay, well, Gandalf, blah blah blah. Is it Fifi from Final Fantasy? I can't remember her name. Anyway, Gigi, I can't remember. Anyway, I'll put together all these things that I think are like, for me, what I think a wizard is. And then I'll look at that image board and say, okay, these are the elements I'm going to draw from when I'm creating my wizard. Because when I'm writing a wizard, this is kind of what I'm thinking about, like what your base thing is for a wizard. Does that make sense? Like, who in your mental Rolodex represents wizard to you? And from there, that's the elements that I'll pull to create my own design on it, you know. Of course, you don't want to go with always familiar tropes, because things should look like paying homage to, but not like, oh, well, this is just Gandalf. It looks just like Gandalf. Like, there's a reason why so many wizards look like Gandalf, you know, and it's kind of like, well, you can do better. Try something different, you know? Because at that point, I think if your wizard looks just like Gandalf, you're kind of like, you as an artist have failed, because it's like, well, put your own spin on it. If you design Gandalf, knowing what you know now, what would you do differently? You know, what would this guy look like? Maybe, you know, he's a fat wizard instead of a really skinny one, or maybe this or that, you know. But you got to think about who your character is to you too when you're writing the story. Is he kind of a fun character, or is he a serious character? Because serious people dress a lot differently than fun people. Fun people are very open people, so their coats are usually open, their robes are open, they're very open and wide and like, you know, versus somebody who's a little bit more private and closed off. Things are kind of closed in, kind of hidden, cloaked, very sunken in. They're not very expressive. They're not out. Arms are going to be close in or down or tucked in. It's understanding how emotions and personality translate into design, because you can look at a person based off of what they wear or how they dress, like, you know, what they're feeling or what they're going through. Like you're wearing a hat and a sweater, so I'm thinking it might be a little chilly over there right now. You know what I mean? It might be a little cold. You're trying to stay warm, so you know it's those things. But it's these mental visual cues that you can work into your character designs that kind of help the narrative along to tell people, because you're telling people who these people are through design. So I hope that answers the question. I hope so. So.
I think you said it fine, but let us know you guys, what's your problems with character designs. Please post your ideas in the comment section and let us know, so Jonboy can answer our questions about them. Well, you said about many things about character designs, but keeping the main features, but you had some very different, crazy idea when you did add a mouse to Spawn. Even Todd McFarlane said this is so cool when you did it back then, and posted it on his own Facebook and Twitter, saying this is new and I do like this. So what came in your mind that you did give Spawn this kind of feature?
I think as an artist, when you're looking back to everything that is Spawn, like when you think Spawn is two people, Todd McFarlane and Greg Capullo, and if I drew Spawn normal, my run is not going to stand out at all. No one's going to remember what I did. No one's going to care. And it's like, for me, I'm like, you know what? I need to do something where it's my Spawn, but I got to do a spin on it. I have to do something that's different, that's going to separate my Spawn from everyone else's. And we're bringing Al Simmons back. So with Al coming back as Spawn, like the original character, I really need to show people that this is a new take from everything else that you've seen. And I remember that Todd created Venom, or now co-created Venom, and Venom had the tongue and mouth. And I'm like, you know what? Like, I'm going to incorporate that into it, because it's kind of a nice paying homage to Todd's past creations, but also it fits well with the character, because Spawn can now emote, show his emotions a lot better, because it used to be just through eyes. And I'm like, you know what? Where he's mad, he can open his mouth, the big tongue comes out, he's like, you know, you really want him to feel like this is something new and something different. So that's why I did that. I wanted to be able to artistically separate my run from all those other guys, because there's no way I'm going to be able to Spawn that is on the same level as Todd's or Greg's or anybody else who worked on it. So the only way I can do that is by doing my own take on it. And if you're allowed to do that, then you should try it. You should do it, because that's going to separate you from everybody else, because people are going to look at it. They're going to judge you by the merit of your own work that you're doing on it, not like what Greg did with it or anything else, because this is different now at that point. Because for me, I didn't want to get compared to Todd or Capullo, because to me, it's like those guys are masters, and it's like I'm not. So I'm like, well, you know, if I just do this, then hopefully, you know, if people love it or hate it, then, you know, whatever. Like, I'm like, for me, I'm just telling people, like, well, get on board. This is it. This is what it's going to be. So if you don't like it, then don't.
How long does it take from you to come with such design that you say that, yeah, this is the one that I would like to use?
Well, it's kind of funny, because like when you grow up with these characters that you've loved for so long and read the books for years and years and years, you have your own idea of what you think would be kind of cool. it's harder to come up with something that is completely your own because you want to make it original. But like everyone's grown up with Batman, everyone's grown up with Spawn now or Captain America, and we have all our own ideas of what would be cool if we, if I added a chin strap to cap, or if I did this or I did that, or made it more military. You know what I mean? We've kind of done that in our heads already, so that it's a little bit easier to translate onto paper. Like I think the redesigns on Spawn took me like maybe just a day. I was just kind of spinning because I had some conversations with Todd. He goes, "Well, what about giving him an axe or doing this or that?" And I'm like, "Yeah, okay." And I talked to the writer on it, and I'm like, "Oh, you know, what would be cool for Spawn?" And we kind of settled on sword because they're like, "Well, we should give Spawn like a really cool sword." I'm like, "Yeah, that would be cool because like we should give Spawn a sword. That would be kind of awesome." So we did, you know, and then it's like, well, what kind of sword would he use? And like, I hate the swords that Todd always designs because they're always like Excalibur like swords, and they're like, and I'm just like, you know, Al Simmons is a military guy. He's like, look, he's a this is going to get the job done type of guy. So it's going to be big, it's going to be bold, it's going to be brutal, and it's just like I just designed this big slab of metal with this big giant hook on it and an axe end on the back, and that's it. Because it's like, this is all I need. It's just this big intimidating weapon. When you look at it, you're like, yeah, this is not a sissy sword. This is like this big, huge, you know. So again, like even the accents that you give a character should be representative of who they are as people. You know what I mean? Because you as a person, the thing that you're going to grab, it's like giving your choice when you're going to go out in the battle, and they're going to give you your choice of guns. Like, what are you going to grab? Like a little WAP-10 that's a little small, tiny gun. Like, pow, pow, pow. You pull that out on a battlefield, people are like, what is a WAP-10? What is that? Like, no one's going to get scared of that. But you pull out like a Gatling gun, people are like, whoa, hey, whoa. Like, you know, hold on a second here, buddy. You know, it changes, but it matches the personality. Because maybe a woman who is more like a spy would probably, I'm going to grab that little gun, I'm going to put it in here and hide it, and then when I need, I'll pull it out and shoot you. You know what I mean? But that fits the narrative. So who those characters are and what they do is probably representative of how they're going to accessorize too. So a spy would not, like James Bond would probably not pick up a Gatling gun unless he absolutely needed it in a firefight. Then if he had access to it, he would do it. But he has a little Walther PPK, which is actually a really small gun, you know. I mean, the bullets are like, you know, holds a lot, but I mean, it's just like, you know, it's a tiny gun, man, you know.
Well, the next question is about influence. So what influenced you guys? Please post your influence in the comment section. Yes. And let's hear what influences Jonboy Meyers.
For me, it was always about manga. So any artist that kind of had a manga feel to their work. So for me, the top guys, my guys were like Michael Golden, Arthur Adams, J. Scott Campbell, Jason Pearson, and Joe Madureira were my 5 big influences. Those are the guys that I just, whatever they did, I would buy their work. I would post it in my studio. I would look at it, try to break it down. I would copy it. I try to figure it out. I'm like, okay, like how does this do this? How do they do this? Because I discovered anime at the same time when I started really getting serious about comics, and I love the energy and the movement of dynamics for anime, and I kind of gravitated to artists that were kind of like that. So if you come into my studio and you look, there's all these anime design books and art of my favorite artists up on the walls everywhere, and these are the guys that inspire me. So in my mind, these are like the pinnacle of where I would like my work to go, what I would like to be, what I like to evolve into. So, and if you always look at my work, there's always going to be a sense of fluid motion to it. Something's always moving in my work. There's something that is moving, whether it's smoke or this or that or hair. You know, there's always some form of movement or dynamicism to the thing. Because if I do static poses, because I've been getting a lot of requests now for like to do like these movie poster shots where they're just kind of standing there, which are super easy to do. I'm like, cool. But then you want to give some element of movement. So I do the element of movement either where the hair is moving slightly or there's embers or there's smoke. Like you're capturing a moment in time or doing something. So those are my influences. But I think whatever influences you, because you don't have to be influenced by other comic book artists in order to create your own comics. Let's say you're influenced by film or by real life. There's nothing wrong with incorporating that into your work too. It's just, for me, the more detailed I get, it just takes so much longer to do. And I'm just like, oh, because it's like the work that I do, if I do something that's really cartoony, it's so much easier and fun. But then they're like, well, do your regular detail work in there. Then it just takes forever. And you're just like, oh man, it takes forever. But I mean, that's something I'm trying to get back to, is more movement instead of detail. But working digitally, you can zoom so close in now. You want to noodle and put everything in there. And you got to fight that urge. Because like when you pull back and read it, those details kind of drop out a little bit. And you're just like, well, I just spent an hour on something people aren't really going to notice too much. Good job on that. It's like, maybe work on the higher things that read, the bigger chunks that read a lot better. So, yeah, it's all process. You figure things out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, so I got a question from our audience. How can an indie comic book artist enter the field now?
Well, the good thing about it is wherever you are in the world, you have social media. There are groups. Launching a book via social media is the best way to do it. Like if you're trying to reach a wider audience, you can adapt your comics to where they can fit onto Instagram so people can enjoy them every day. Or you can create your own Facebook page for your character and post content like that every day. The thing about it is, don't expect 1 million people to just run to your page. Mm-hmm. You build very slowly. The thing is, the thing that as an indie creator you want to build your audience from is, try to focus on getting one new person a day, but also try to deliver content on a regular basis. So let's say you're doing a comic book. Let's start out like realistically, like, hey, when I first start out, I want to do 1 to 2 pages a week. That's what I'm going to post. Comic pages for my character. Like, let's say it's Ninja Man, right? And you want to do a Ninja Man comic, and I'm going to start a page, and I want people to interact with this character. So I'm going to do 2 pages a week and try to build my audience and interact with people and promote it. Like, hey, come check out Ninja Man. This is my page, free comics, blah, blah, blah. And then once you're pretty good on that cadence of 2 pages a week, like, you know what, I'm going to try to do 3 pages a week now and see how people respond. So, hey guys, we're adding a 3rd page a week. Oh, mind blown. And do that. And each time people are going to see your growth. It's consistency that is key. Consistency. And once you're building up that consistency in your fan base and in your work and the way you deliver that, then increase. And pretty soon, guess what? You'll have 24 pages, 40 pages, 52 pages. And then like, hey guys, you can talk to your audience because they're interacting with you already on your Facebook page and say, hey, I want to collect this into a hardcover or soft cover. What do you guys think? If I did this, would you guys order it? There's places like Lulu you can do where it's print on demand, where you can put it together in your own book. People can order it, and then you get a percentage of it. You can do that. The thing about it is you don't necessarily have to be with a big publisher in order to put out content. You can just do it all digital via social media, or interact with your audience. Keep in mind, if you go to Twitter and you post, it might get a little toxic there. So I don't do Twitter at all. But try to make your interactions with your audience as positive as you can. People are going to give you negative comments, and if so, just it's like, don't even answer them. Don't even acknowledge them, because the thing about it is, once you answer some critic's observation about you or what you're doing, they kind of already won, because they want that engagement. They want that acknowledgement. If you don't give them that, then they usually just go away. You know what I mean? It's just like, well, that's cool. I don't have to respond to you. I'm not going to respond to that. It's a BS comment. Why do I have to even, like, whatever? That's cool. Because if you go to their pages and look, they probably you find out they like My Little Pony and a bunch of other stuff that you're like, why am I even going to give this guy any opinion? Look at what he likes, or look how he draws. Like, yeah, whatever. It's just like, let them have their own. It's all right. So.
Well, another question about can we do this with WEBTOON and other platforms?
Um, yes, you can. The thing about it is you want to build your own audience first, because if you go straight to Webtoons, whatever you create, they may own a percentage of, or you might not be able to get enough of a following.
Attention.
Right. The thing is, you want to build your own market audience first as much as you can. And you can do that on your own by social media, because then when you go to an entity like Webtoon, you can say, look, on my webpage per week, because you can do the metrics on it. You can pull your metrics for your art page or your Ninja Man page or whatever, and say, look, you know what? I have 20,000 fans on my page. I get about 500 interactions every time I post up a new page every week. Here's the metrics. Of these, I have these many unique users who interact on this. That gives you a platform to say, look, like, this is the type of deal I'm looking for. If I go to Webtoons, it gives you a better negotiating tool, because they know now that you're on, they're probably going to follow you to Webtoons to enjoy the content and do that, because an idea is a better platform. But you can still deliver content on your own platform too. So it gives you some options. But don't think that being at a publisher or at Webtoons is going to be like, oh, okay, I have to be there in order to be successful. No, you want to build it. When I say grassroots, you want to build it small and grow it into something, over time. So you don't necessarily need those outlets to be successful, because many people who've done their own webcomics started out on Instagram or social media, and they do just fine on that. So, so there's a way to grow. The thing about it is once you hit 50,000, followers or something like that on Instagram, many companies will just say, hey, look, we'll start paying you if you promote our products on top of what you're doing. So there's different ways to monetize. I mean, the thing is, slow and steady. Like, have a long-term plan of where you want to be, like, in 1 year, 5 years, 10 years. You know what I mean? Those are things that you need to work on. It's like putting together a business plan. Kind of know where you want this to end up, and that's what you're working towards. Like, okay, well, I want to grow this content, and within 2 years, I want to have a core readership of 50,000 people that I can now take to Webtoons and say, I want to do this. Or you can even take to a publisher, a Random House or Penguin or whatever. Like, hey, look, I've got all this content here. I've been doing this. I have these many viewers. I've sold my own books. This made this much. Like, hey, what's up? Or they may even come to you, because the thing is, market share says a lot. It's not always monetary that people care about. It's about how many people are coming to your page to interact with your content at that point. Because a publisher knows that if I can monetize on top of that and put that in a published form, at least 1/3 of that audience will pick up that book. So if you have, let's say, 100,000 people, or like 1 million people who follow your comic or whatever, if you put out a printed comic, that at least even 1% of that is going to pick up your book. So what's 1% of 1 million? You know what I mean? That's still pretty good numbers, and you sell that for like $19.99. You do the math. It translates into really good numbers. So there's always a way. You just have to be creative about it. I think you have to look at what your choices are on a bigger level than just on a macro level. You know what I mean? Publishing isn't, comics, the market is not what it was in, the 90s or early 2000s. It's not the same thing. It's a different animal now. They've actually shrunk. The thing is, if you can do something that's more digital, you're actually a pioneer in that space. And it's kind of like the Wild West. Set up your own little town now, because build it, people will come, as long as you engage with your audience and you deliver on a regular basis. So I hope that helps. So
well, it really helps so much, actually. Yeah. You gave us all the secrets about this matter. I mean, me personally, I appreciate what you just told us.
Yeah, it's not secrets. It's just like people always want the fastest way in there. It's like, well, how do I do this fast? And there's nothing done fast. If you want to build it and build it right, it's done over time. It's done building an audience and engaging with your fan base and creating a fan base, because that is what follows you. As much as I talk about fan base for design, fan base for yourself as an artist is so important, because they're going to follow you to whatever project you do. So the thing is, you owe to them to create content all the time. You know what I mean? You want them to continue. You have to produce. You have to put stuff out. So that's what matters.
That's so cool. Well, let us guys know what you think about WEBTOON, Tapas, and other platforms. Did you already create a character and then go ahead and create your own audience, create your own social media fans? So next one is, how do you build a portfolio?
Well, it depends what you want to do. Again, like if we'll just say for comics. So if you want to build a comics portfolio, I would always recommend just doing some sample pages. So what I would always start out with is just a model sheet of who the characters are. So that is what you draw from when you're drawing your characters. So let's say you want to do a Spider-Man sample. So I would do a shot of Spider-Man. Whoever the characters are, the main characters are in your samples is what you want to do. So let's say I'm going to write up a quick story. Write up your own story and you want to do it to where you're showcasing your talents for comics. So it's usually between 5 and 7 pages that you want to show an editor if you want to get work. Okay, so it's usually a quiet scene. You want to show everyday stuff, and then you want to show something happens, and then the action build up. So let's say I'm going to do a thing where it's Spider-Man and Mary Jane fight. I don't know. Let's say fight Venom. Okay, so I'm going to do a character design for Venom. Say, okay, this is how my Venom is going to look. I'm going to do a character design for Peter Parker and Mary Jane, and then a character design for Spider-Man. So I'm like, okay, these are my characters. Like, cool. Put those in your portfolio towards the back. And then I'm going to put together my quiet scenes. So, like, say maybe it starts out with just Peter and Mary Jane. You know, Mary Jane's sleeping, and Peter comes in the door, and he's bringing her breakfast in bed, and it's that quiet scene where they're doing breakfast in bed and they're talking and they're just interacting. This is normal stuff. This is showing people that you can draw normal people doing normal things in a normal scene. Characters having breakfast in bed and talking. How can you make that interesting, right? And then all of a sudden, maybe page 2 or page 3, Peter's, my spider fence goes off. And then all of a sudden there's an explosion outside the window and they both run out to the window, open the window, look off the fire escape, and they see this giant explosion at the Empire State Building, right? So that's maybe page 3 and 4. Spidey's like, I have to go. And she goes, go, Peter, right? So he dresses up as Spider-Man, and then you have then maybe you do a splash of Spider-Man. Like he turns into Spider-Man and he's like, doing his Spider-Man thing. So that's your splash shot. And then you have the one where he confronts Venom, and then that's the fight. And then you do a little fight scene, and that's it. So of your 5 to 7 pages, you want to have a lot of quiet scenes where normal characters doing normal things. You can have a splash shot of the character in action or fighting, but then you got to have some things to show that how you would handle a fight scene a little bit, like, hey, it'd be like this. So that way you're kind of clicking off the bases because you're showing that you can do normal people, making those shots interesting. You can do perspective. You can draw city scenes. You can draw cars, things like that, the important stuff. So, and that's stuff to put in your portfolio. Don't feel like, because if you do something full of splash pages, I'm just going to be like, you want to do covers, you know, or whatever. Because like you have to figure out what type of artist you want to be. Because if you just want to do cover art, then show nothing but covers. Then you want to get an ArtStation page at that point and just show your cover work, you know. So that's the way for comics if you want to get best noticed to get work. But the even better way to get noticed in comics is to put out your own indie book. Again, do work for yourself. And if you can do your own book and let's say you put out 5 issues of your own book, that is actually a walking advertisement to say, oh, you did a book on your own, 5 issues, you wrote, pencil, and drew it. And it came out all at the same time, you know what I mean? Like every month, and you put it out. An editor is going to see, like, this is what his book is going to look like over 5 issues. He did it on his own. He put it out. You know what I mean? That's a walking advertisement for yourself. Having 5 issues of your own content that you put out on your own is probably a better advertisement of what type of artist you're going to be, what type of work you're going to do for a publisher. You know what I mean? Because if that work is really good, they're going to like, put this guy on Spider-Man. Oh, man, he's going to rock. He's going to be on time. He's going to look like this. Great. Done. You know what I mean? That's even better way to do it, because a lot of people now are actually getting work based off of their indie work now. You know, they have their own indie books, they put it out, and then Marvel or DC looks at that and then hires them based off of that. So that's actually, for me, I think, even a better way to get noticed, because at that point they're coming to you, you're not going to them. So you're at a better point of negotiation, saying, well, you know, hey, you put out this thing, we like your work, would you ever be interested in Spider-Man? I'm like, yeah, I'd be interested in Spider-Man. Like, what are you offering? Oh, well, we'd want you to work on this thing for 5 issues, and, you know, we'd pay you this. Like, well, you know, my indie book, off of that I make this much, so I can't do it for this, but I could do it for this. You know, and they're like, well, if I pencil and ink, or am I writing this too? Like, yeah, then you work in a big rate for that, you know? So you always want people to come to you rather you go to them, because it puts you in a better space to negotiate a little bit. Just don't get too crazy. Don't think you're going to be a millionaire working in comics, because you can become a millionaire in comics if you're working on your own content. Like, less than 1% actually become really well off working in comics, because publishers and big companies are big companies for a reason. You know what I mean? You know, so they're going to make the bulk of that money and stuff like that. You're not going to get a lot of it. So the idea is to leverage them and the brands that you work on, like Batman or Superman or whatever, and then, you know, go back and do your own indie stuff. And hopefully that Batman audience that you just worked on will follow you there. And you can bounce back and forth. But the thing is, you're showing that you're not an artist, you're a creator. And pretty soon you'll be creating your own content. And then if people want to make a movie or whatever, they come straight to you and say, hey, we really like Ninja Man. We want to make a movie. Here's a bucket of money. Can we do and make this movie? And you're like, yes, I will take this bucket of money. And yes, you can make that movie. You know what I mean? So try to have that mentality about it. Like, you know, it's great working for the bigger companies too, but always remember, try to work some content for yourself as well. You know, as much as you do work for them, do some work for you too. So balance it out.
Well, that's truly amazing, the way you explain this. So, is there any characters or stories you are dying to draw?
I always wanted to work on Batman, which probably never going to happen, or Captain America. They're two of my favorites, but I'm actually working on my own stuff right now. I'm working on my own creator-owned book called Princess Dragon Killer, which I'm still working on, but hopefully it will be coming out. What's
the name of your story again?
It's called Princess Dragon Killer. It's about this elven princess who kills dragons. So it's going to be more fantasy stuff. Because I think there's so many superhero books out there. The idea of putting out your own superhero book, I have nothing to offer in a superhero book right now. So I think kind of doing my own thing would probably be a lot better for me. So
yeah. Are we expecting it in 2021?
I am hopefully like late summer 2021 is my goal. So we'll see, fingers crossed. So
well, I will be waiting personally for
yeah, I hope people like it. So hopefully I'll be making announcements hopefully February and March, I think. So we'll see. Hopefully. Yeah.
Any tips and tricks to share with our audience?
As far as work, or like I would say just
just a tip or two. It's up to you to say if it's in general or in art.
I think the thing about it is when you're doing pages, just remember, like, not every page has to be, you know what I mean? Like, a good cadence is every third page you want to have something really, you know what I mean? It's like a dance. Dun, 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 boom, dun, 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 boom. So when you have some quiet pages, like if you have, like, you feel like, okay, 2 boring pages and 1 super interesting page. So on that page, play with the camera angles a little bit more, make it a bigger character shot, because everything should have a payoff. Because remember, like, dun, 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 ba, dun, 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 ba. That's how you're pacing out a book. It's like, it should be like a cool song, like, have a beat here, then this is something where you're like, and try to land those beats when you're doing it. Read the script, really get into the script and think about it and say, okay, this is the panel where I want to make it, where I want people to really sit on what Peter Parker just did or Mary Jane just said. Like when Peter says, I love you, you know, he's telling Mary Jane, hey, I love you. Maybe make that a really big emotional beat page where he's really grabbing her face, and you really feel that. And maybe that's the thing that you want to spend the most time on for those 3 pages, is like that shot, because that whole sequence winds up is the payoff on that. Because every 3 pages you want to have a payoff a little bit, where what's happening, like, you know, Spidey and Venom are fighting, and then the 3rd page, Spidey really gives him a big uppercut and knocks Venom out, or does whatever. That's the culmination. You know what I mean? It's that big beat. Because the thing about it is, if everything is a big beat, then nothing in that whole layout is special, because everything is huge, and it's just like you're creating focus and you're creating the moment where it's the buildup for the page. So always kind of remember, every 2 to 3 pages you want to say, okay, what's the buildup for this scene right here? So every 3 pages, like, okay, this is the scene I really want to play up a little bit more, make it big. Okay, this is the scene I want to play big. Okay, this is a big fight scene. I want to play this moment up really big. So, so it's little things like that that kind of add to a better comic book experience, because I am not a big proponent of the 6 to 9 panel grid. I find it constricting and incredibly boring. Cookie cutter, not everything should be cookie cutter. If it is cookie cutter, it's part of your narrative. If you want to keep a scene like that until you do the buildup and then everything opens up again, then yes, you can use that as a tool. But you always want to keep changing it up. Like for me, I'm not big on those, but you know, if you are an artist who's big on those, then go for it. Like for me, I'm more about creating moments and bringing energy and emotionality into it. And for me, sometimes having those little borders don't always work all the time. So you got to know when you want to break those borders, because it's that big moment or that big beat that you're doing that for. But if you do it on everything, then it's not special anymore. It's kind of like glitter everywhere. And guess what? Glitter's not special anymore. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, you just made glitter insignificant now because everything's glitter. It's too much of a good thing. You can't do it. So save those things for really special stuff. I guess that's what I would want to say. I hope that translates. Yeah.
It's so cool, actually. I do love hearing those answers from you. I actually learned a lot from you, as our audience did. Well, so let us hear what you think, guys, about the character designs, creating a page and making splash page, adjusting your colors of comics, creating your own social media fans before you head to WEBTOON on the pass. Feel free to post those ideas in the comment section here or on the YouTube version of the video. Many thanks again to Jonboy Meyers, and it's time for joining us for this broadcast.
Thanks for having me. And the main thing is just keep drawing. If you're really serious about art, treat it like a second job. Like it's like sports, like soccer. You want to get good at it, spend time at it. So
well, that's true indeed.
That's right.
Well, so many thanks again, guys, and goodbye.
See you guys.